Back in 2010, over a period of time, Anthony was having significant changes in his bowel habits. He was going to the toilet 3 and 4 times a day. Eventually in September or October 2010, we both went together to see his GP, and his GP sort of said we need to do some faeces samples, so we did that, and one of the samples came back with microscopic blood levels in it, so kind of went, it's only one sample, but we better go for a colonoscopy just to be on the safe side. In February, went to the appointment. The doctor had told him that he had a tumour. So he stayed home, I went off to work. He had been on the phone talking to his parents and he was really upset, and by the time I actually got through to him it was about midday, and he just burst into tears on the phone, and then I did, and I said, right, I'm coming home. He was a real wreck and it was awful. Anyway, we ended up seeing the surgeon again on the Monday. He made a referral to Brian Dragonek. He then had to see Dr. Tony Bonaventura, who is a medical oncologist. Brian arranged for the surgery to happen after Anthony had pre-operative chemo and radiotherapy to try and shrink the tumour down. He had the treatment, then he had his operation on the 20th of June in 2011, and the surgeon was very pleased with the results. The tumour had shrunk down from the pre-operative treatment to next to nothing. He then started a course of fortnightly chemotherapy. Basically, he was quite well, went to work, and then in January 2012 he was given the all clear. We had a little surprise party for him to celebrate the end of treatment and that everything was all clear. He was going for regular follow-up visits with the oncologist, and in May or June last year the doctor rang him and said they found a lesion in his lung. So he went and had a PET scan, and what that found was that there were some hot spots under his left arm, some hot spots, 2 hot spots in his liver, and of course it also showed the tumour in his lung, which was quite big. We then had the PET scan again in September, and that came back with fairly unhappy results, really. There was the tumour in the lung, which we knew about. There were 2 tumours in the liver and 2 in the armpit. Tony's prognosis for him was between 3 to 5 years. We went to the GP, and the GP sort of talked about a few options. People with cancer can get lung clots, blood clots, so she sent him for an x-ray for that, couldn't see any lung clots, which was good, and then also sent him for a CT scan. The CT scan, as it turned out, showed a hell of a lot of rubbish news, and one of those was that the tumour in his lung had grown 1.5 centimetres in a month, and the tumours in his liver were growing. Small tumours were seen in both lungs, so it made the situation a lot worse, and that the chemo itself wasn't working. So in about May, I think, he also had some radiotherapy on the tumour in his lung to shrink it down to stop that coughing, because it was pressing on one of the bronchial airway tubes into the lung and sort of was squashing it a bit, so making breathing a little bit difficult, but also causing a very annoying cough. While he was having the radiotherapy, he had a day when he was in so much pain, it was horrendous. Then at the end of the beginning of July it was, he had been vomiting. And so I took him up to the chemo unit, and they noticed he had a bit of a droop in his left side of his mouth and left eye. By sort of 5 o'clock that afternoon, the 2nd of July, we discovered that he had 4 brain tumours. When we got that diagnosis, I decided not to go back to work. After the Tuesday, he had an MRI scan, and when we saw our oncologist on Friday afternoon, Tony showed us the images, and he said actually there's more than 4 tumours, there's actually 8, who then arranged for Anthony to start on the following Thursday whole of brain radiotherapy. And then on the following Sunday he had an epileptic seizure here at home, which was absolutely terrifying. We called an ambulance and they were fantastic and took him to the Mater, and that's when they discovered that the radiotherapy had pretty much caused the brain to swell. What we discovered was that the whole of brain radiotherapy hadn't worked at all. The tumours in his brain had not only grown but had multiplied, and basically his prognosis, when they first found the first 8 brain tumours, they were talking about maybe 3 to 6 months, but when they realised that the tumours had grown and multiplied, they then said 1 to 2 months. As it turned out, it was 11 days from that diagnosis to the time that he died on the 13th of August. And that was an incredibly short period of time. The things that he had wanted to do, that we had hoped to do, including things like having a family portrait done, going on a bit of a holiday, none of those things were possible. You hear lots of stories about people who pass away and how they're dignified or how they're so amazing and stuff, and I kind of never really thought about it like that, but I realised in that last week, in the week before Anthony died, he never complained. He never said, "Oh, woe is me." He was always trying to make other people feel better. And he was still himself, even on the Monday morning. And then the kids and I were there at the hospital when he finally passed away in the early hours of the Tuesday morning. You don't realise the strength and courage that people have until you have to go through events like this and you realise what people are made of. And I think our girls are made of pretty strong stuff. And while of course they're sad and will always miss their dad, it's been an experience that they have grown into extremely mature young women, and I think they're both going to have very fulfilling and incredible lives.